I gave speedrunners $1,000 to beat Resident Evil 4 without the merchant. As many of you already know, the merchant is essential to the RE4 experience, and since I love subjecting myself to some of the most brutal challenges gaming has to offer, I decided to host a no merchant Resident Evil 4 tournament and bring the top speedrunners in the RE4 scene together and compete for cash in a 3-day jam-packed event. In this video, I'll be going over the event itself and covering the strategies used and how they differentiate from the Any% Pro speedrun, which is where many of these runners have proven themselves in the past. But before we do that, I want to make sure that G Fuel is properly appreciated for their involvement in this event. G Fuel is the best choice for your energy needs. With 0 sugar and only 15 calories per serving, you get the energy you need to keep you going without the crash, and without the empty calories. They actually funded this entire tournament, including paying for our amazing staff who work behind the scenes to help run the event. If y'all haven't had the chance to do so, please head on over to gfuel.com and grab a tub to show your support for them and the event. And of course, don't forget to use code HAZE at checkout for up to 30% off. Seriously, we would not have been able to put on this event if it were not for their support, so thanks so much to G Fuel for sponsoring this event. Before the triathlon of speedrun challenges began, runners needed to qualify during a 2-week period by submitting a speedrun of them completing Resident Evil 4 on professional difficulty without talking to the merchant. As this event included only the very best of RE speedrunners, and given the extreme difficulty of this challenge, only 5 runners were skilled enough to qualify. Those runners were Missing No RE4, Fregelhausen, Blanks, Joydern Yup, and Shark0v0. These runners have all demonstrated remarkable skill in RE4, with many of them holding world records across various categories. Upon the conclusion of the qualifying period, I personally invited our runners and provided them with a bingo card which they would review prior to day 1 of the tournament. The bingo cards were all shuffled to make things slightly different for each runner and contained challenges such as saving that good boy in Chapter 3, completing requests, unlocking certain achievements, and even getting your character killed. I really wanted the challenges to be a combination of added difficulty while also showcasing the amazing things that Capcom put into RE4 and how much love went into making the game. We had an interesting arrangement of tactics used by the runners in filling out their bingo cards, and overall they did a great job of preparing their routes and adapting to the added requirements of finishing their speedruns. Keep in mind, these runs were also done on professional difficulty, so simply completing the game was difficult enough, let alone having to do extra objectives to earn points in the tournament. Speaking of points, the bingo cards were done in such a way that getting bingos were equally as important as finishing the run. So if you filled out your bingo card but didn't finish the run, you were leaving points on the table, and vice versa. At the end of day 1, we had a decent spread on the leaderboard, with Blanks and Missing No nearly maxing out their bingo cards, and still finishing their runs with a competitive time which earned them some bonus points. For day 2, runners were tasked with finishing the game as quickly as possible while also competing with one another to have the most money at the end of the game. Runners with the most money were awarded with the most points, and similar to day 1, equal emphasis was put on completing the game quickly, so the fastest runners received a small bonus to their score for day 2. Accumulating wealth in RE4 tends to happen pretty naturally by picking up treasures, killing bosses, and buying and selling with the merchant, but when every dollar counts, it's up to each runner to ensure that they pick up as much treasure as possible and waste as little resources by the end of the game so they can cash out their inventories and finish the game with the most amount of money possible. Many runners opted to save money by restricting their rocket launcher purchases, which can set you back by 160,000 each time you buy one. In a few cases, we saw runners taking advantage of the ammo swap glitch as well, but stopping short of consuming the rocket launcher and instead taking a bit of time loss in order to sell that launcher back and get a partial refund. Honestly, I was expecting most runners to just avoid the launchers entirely, so I was pretty impressed to see the strategy pay off for the runners who finished at the top. And by the end of day 2, we saw some more movement on the leaderboard, which really drove up the stakes as the low end of the leaderboard needed to really push for a solid time for the no merchant showdown on day 3. And for the runners at the top, they'd need to stay as competitive as possible in order to secure their spots and remain in the money. This would prove to be an absolutely insane leaderboard going into day 3. With all of our runners going in incredibly prepared, but always at the mercy of what the game might throw at them. Many of the strategies used in the Any% professional speedrun work in no merchant, but since you can't buy the rifle early in the game, there's quite a few modifications to the strategies in order to make no merchant possible. I'm going to go over the no merchant pro route and cover the strategies our runners used and ultimately reveal who came out on top. The beginning of the game starts off exactly the same as Any% professional, and the first real differences make themselves apparent when running past treasures, as money has absolutely no value in a no merchant run. That said, health becomes much more abundant, almost obnoxiously so, because normally you sell most of the healing items in the village to pay for rifle upgrades for El Gigante. But in no merchant, most of the first aid sprays are saved for the castle, and runners are at liberty to use whatever herbs they come across to stay alive during the village section. Where things really start to get interesting is El Gigante in Chapter 4. Since you can't buy and upgrade the rifle, runners resort to setting up a glitch referred to as DA0, which involves manipulating the game's action and item point systems to change the amount of damage enemies receive to a value greater than even assisted difficulty. This technique is used during the Del Lago fight as well, but for the purposes of this tournament, I did not allow Del Lago DA0 because of how annoying it can be to set up in a live environment. If you're not already aware, DA, or difficulty adjustment, is a feature that's been around since the original RE4 and has gone through many iterations over the past 18 years. But the way it works in RE4 Remake is that you have two different values that affect your DA rank: action points and item points. Item points are pretty simple to understand. They're a combined value of all the supplies you have in your attaché case. I won't get into everything's exact value, but for the purposes of understanding how it works, just know that ammo, herbs, knives, grenades, and crafting materials all have a predetermined value, and you can manipulate what's in your inventory to achieve a specific item point value to set up DA0. Action points, on the other hand, are a totally different ballgame. Primarily, you accrue action points by killing enemies. Alternatively, you can get them by reaching checkpoints and not killing anything. Action points are capped at 5,000, so by hitting the cap and then taking damage, which leaves you with a decimal value, you can then leverage your item points to reach a specific sum, which activates DA0. From there, El Gigante becomes a knife-only fight, and as long as you don't take damage or break your knife, he'll die relatively quickly. And since he's on DA0, he moves incredibly slow, making it that much easier to kill him without getting hit. Next up in the No Merchant run is Chapter 5, which has you do a modified version of the out of bounds done in any % professional to skip having to worry about protecting Ashley in the village. And then you'll use the ammo swap glitch to hopefully get through the cabin quickly without relying on the shotgun. This, of course, is much easier said than done, given that if you throw a grenade too close to yourself, it removes the ammo swap glitch, and you'll have to hope there's a granada with a torch nearby to help you set it up again. Speaking of which, to set it up, you need to be near something that causes you to take damage over time, such as fire or liquid nitrogen, and while you're in the active animation of taking damage, carefully swap between the weapon you want to use, and then back to the weapon that you want to spend ammo from. The result in the cabin is essentially having infinite grenades, as even with 0 bullets in your handgun, the game will still allow you to throw them. You can broaden the number of frames available to achieve this glitch by reloading the shotgun just before entering the damage over time animation, making it slightly easier to set up. This can be done with just about any weapon in the game, making various sections of the speedrun much easier when using items such as grenades and rocket launchers. Which leads us to Chapter 6. After entering Chapter 6, our runners once again deviate from the any % pro route by killing the Chainsaw Sisters with the ammo swap glitch instead of the rifle. And since they can't talk to the merchant, they must proceed to kill Mendez with, you guessed it, the ammo swap glitch again. This fight is actually pretty funny because you could just stun lock him to death in both phases consistently. Poor guy. Anyway, in Chapter 7, the catapult room has a tendency to be pretty toxic without the rifle, but more importantly, without the rifle, the Garrador cannot be skipped, and the water hall is slightly more challenging. But after completing those sections, the run's pretty chill for a while after that. And eventually players will acquire the CQBR, which is more or less the saving grace for the endgame for No Merchant Pro. The CQBR has high firepower even without upgrades, and eventually can be fitted with the infrared scope to deal with the more troublesome enemies on the island, as well as to execute the late game skips. By the time players reach the double Garrador, they can use the CQBR as well as grenades to deal with the threat as long as they have at least one heavy grenade for Verdugo. Verdugo is then trivialized by using, of course, the ammo swap glitch on the heavy nades while simultaneously freezing him and then getting Leon stuck at the edge of some equipment while spamming explosives, killing Verdugo before he has a chance to do much of anything at all. Chapter 11 is mostly just Krauser in the minecart, although skipping the dynamite section and blowing up Double Gigante is not possible since there's no rocket launcher in this route. That said, pretty much everything until the Krauser fight in Chapter 14 is exactly the same, since you can fit the CQBR with the infrared scope as mentioned earlier and deal with the regenerator with the wrench, and use the scope to clip through the gates and skip the factory. The Krauser fight itself is not particularly difficult though, since the CQBR can be fired in short bursts with pause buffering to mitigate recoil, which hits Krauser for about 3% of his HP per headshot. For the last 2 chapters, runners are hoping to ensure that they have at least one heavy grenade and enough items in their inventory to set up DA0 again for Sadler. The difference between Sadler's DA0 setup and El Gigante's is that you actually need to achieve DA0 during the fight, which sounds difficult, but actually just involves being 50 points above the threshold and then using the shotgun to explode the barrel at the start of the fight. From there, you use the reload setup for the ammo swap to set up infinite heavy grenades, and with that setup, as long as you stand in a certain spot, Sadler's first phase is over in just a few seconds, and phase 2 is just surviving long enough to get the special rocket launcher. For From there, the escape sequence is exactly the same as all the other speedrun categories, and a big fat GG is waiting at the end of that tunnel. After 3 days of competition, we had a crazy spread on the leaderboards, but only 3 runners could make it into the money. And our winners were Missing No, Blanks, and Fregelhausen. In case you missed the event, you can see the full coverage on my VOD channel, which you can find in the description, as well as at youtube.com/@HazebladeVods. Thank you so much for watching this recap of the Hazeblade Invitational. I had so much fun putting this event together, and I can't wait to do another one like this in the future. If you enjoyed this video, it'd mean a ton if you'd consider subscribing to the channel. I make lots of content for horror and Souls-like games, so if you like this video, I know you'll enjoy the other content on my channel. I want to thank G Fuel once again for sponsoring this event, and a huge round of thank yous to Sneevil, our amazing host, Speedy-ish and Avenged Wolf on the mod team, Dynasty, Basic, Gabriel, and Nevs, who confirmed bingo cards, Joey from the Run.gg, who set up the qualifier page, our friends over at Matcherino for providing the platform for the prize pool, our runners Missing No, Blanks, Fregelhausen, Joydern, and Shark, and of course a huge thank you to everyone who bolstered the prize pool with a contribution. This event took a lot of planning, and I'm so happy that it all came together. But that's it for now. Take care, y'all, and we'll see you next time.